everyone, thanks for clicking. So this is just an add-on at the end of our Wise Phone series to discuss why we chose the particular phones that we did and why we didn't choose some of the other ones, and how our original plans actually got sidetracked a few times.
Yeah. Yeah, sidetracked, side-loaded during the processing.
Completely booted out?
Yes,
bootloaded out?
Bootloaded out. Man, it's been a learning experience, and interestingly enough, starting off with the G3 is a good thing because the G3 turned out to be very doable phone for this process, and I was under the impression that other phone models of similar vintage were going to be as easy. In theory, they should have been, but we've come across a few little hiccups. So I wrote a few notes here just so I wouldn't forget, but let's see. Do you want to go through the process? The G5 was our next one.
Yeah, our next phone that we thought would work.
So the reason for the G3, we talked about it before, removable battery is amazing. The G5 also is really even better because you just have to push two buttons on the side and the whole battery slides out.
It's pretty cool. It's a really awesome phone.
It is a great phone, and so in theory, that was supposed to work, but we learned a few things that, in addition to getting used phones that are carrier unlocked, which is pretty standard nowadays, most used phones are going to be sold that it's carrier unlocked, and that's fine, provided you still use the stock Android Google operating system. What we have learned, unfortunately, is that there seems to be a very tight relationship between the phone manufacturers and the telecom companies.
Shocking.
Yes, that are preventing you from rolling back. So if you've got a certain version, we'll get into that later, but we found that, okay, so you have to have a certain version of Android, or it can't be above that, otherwise the rollback gets detected by the bootloader, and it undoes all your changes, right? And so it was very frustrating. So there's these hoops to jump through. So the other thing was, G5s, the Lineage operating system, they provide all these different models of G5s that you can use.
But there's quite a few more manufactured types than there are Lineage systems for.
Right. So here's the kicker. Until you can get a custom bootloader installed, there's nothing you can do with the G5. And the trick that has recently changed, maybe it's happened in the last few years with LG, is that they severely limited the amount of phone models that you can actually unlock the bootloader, because the instructions for the G5s all say, just put it in developer mode, do this, and then you've got an option to unlock the bootloader. Yeah, well, it's grayed out on a lot of the models. So right now LG only supports the 988 version of the G5, right? But they just say, well, if you create an LG account and you log into their developer website and you send them the phone EMEI number, and then you go through a process during an ADB command sequence to get a code that you have to email to LG along with the phone ID number. Then LG will send you a code to put in, a command prompt, to unlock the bootloader. Yeah, that's in theory. I've been waiting now for 6 weeks from LG. I've contacted them repeatedly. Nobody gets back to me. No reply, nothing. And I know that the email is getting through because the first email I just sent to the LG technical support, and they said, yeah, that's fine. Just speak to, or they sent me an email address. I think it's devbootloader@lge.com. And so I've been sending emails asking, providing pictures. They want a picture of the back of the phone. And it's just like, what is it? Am I trying to open a safety deposit box at a bank? It's that crazy. And it's just like, all I want to do is unlock the bootloader. Why are cell phone manufacturers... This is turning into be a venting
I know.
session.
I was like,
Kayla's leaning back because there's just all this venting energy coming out. But it's so frustrating because it's just like, you are preventing people from unlocking the bootloader because you don't want people to be putting custom images on these phones. Why? We can make another video that might not be on YouTube about that subject. But I have some ideas about that.
Yeah. And then we get into the A5, which is the phone that I'm currently using, which is a good phone.
Right.
And how it works, but only for Canadian SIMs.
That's all we've been able to test. So we got, so we got...
we're having hiccups with the American SIMs.
Yeah, so we got the A5 versions, the Canadian model versions, and when we do testing on the US networks, it works.
Only for data.
Only for data, but
so
voice and...
Yeah, so the actual aspect of a phone, which is hilarious because...
Right, so yeah, it's just like, okay, so you can't talk and you can't send text messages, but the data works fine. Mm-hmm. Really weird. So we're sorting through that. Now, one of the reasons that the text messages wasn't working was it was clear that the APN configuration was wrong, the access point names. And this is, for a lot of people that are not, into this, I mean, it's all technical terms, but text messaging is a difficult protocol because of its history.
It's very complicated. It's like they built a city on top of a small town that they didn't map for growth.
Right,
kind of thing.
Text messaging, I don't know if some people might remember in the early days of text messaging, you had
character limits
and all that stuff. So all the modern day SMS is kind of built on these old standards and making it seem like there's no character limits, but in the background, a lot of this stuff is still happening, and that's why text messaging can be a bit of a gong show, and it's important to have the access point names, which are normally supplied from the SIM card. You pop in the SIM card, and then your phone operating system reads it. Yeah, but again, the phone SIM cards are assuming that you either have Apple iOS or you have a valid version of Android installed. And then when you have something else that's missing, then the phone will be like, well, I don't know what to do with this. So the disadvantage is like, well, we can't manually edit APNs in Lineage OS at this point. Hopefully that'll come.
And then the next phone is new to us. It's the Pixel XL, which is a Google phone,
so
ironically.
Yeah. So we were kind of guided in the direction that, the Google phones, they should be pretty unlockable and easy to work with and things like that. So we got a couple of Google Pixel XLs.
And then laughed at the irony, and then after that,
Google. So really, Google is we're making the hardware, and we're not putting the operating system on. Mm-hmm. So one of the phones, the bootloader is just unlocked. Like, we cannot unlock the bootloader. It is grayed out. There's all kinds of information that just saying, well, if you just have it online for a little while and go to visit some websites, eventually the phone will be able to unlock, but nothing, right? And there's no recourse. Some forums that we've looked at are like, well, really, if the bootloader is locked, that's just the carrier that was used at some point, pushed a change in the system of the phone. And again, even with a custom recovery on the one Pixel XL that we were able to get, why one of them was unlockable and why one wasn't, it's a mystery. So we've got one Pixel XL that's working, but then
it worked for data and it worked for phone calls, but it wouldn't work for texts, which was weird because you could send texts but not receive them.
Right. So
and then, even then, you couldn't send them with specific carriers. You had to have a non-mainstream carrier.
Right. So yes, we've been digging in. We've been trying different carriers and things. So this is it's just
figuring out where they're blocking you because they're clearly trying to.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the solution for the one Pixel XL this is still the audition process and the trial process of seeing what phones are easy to work with.
And that it is possible, but it's only possible for certain phones, even of certain manufactured, and then only for certain carriers.
Yeah,
there's always a hiccup.
Yeah. So anyway, we got the text messaging working eventually. I did some digging and found out that if you manually install an APK file called Google Carrier Services. Now we're still working to determine if that is actually installing any Google Services framework. My understanding is not. That it's just installing the necessary, in other words, Google hardware now as of the last year and a half, they implemented this Carrier Services APK so that the phone calls the mothership, Google, to find out the latest APN parameters from your carrier provider. And so, okay, fine, if that's all that's happening, but we still have to determine if there's anything else
Data
happening.
sharing.
So, yeah.
And then it came back to why we're picking older phones instead of newer phones. It's because we found that the system would be impossible to deal with if it was at any point updated to Android 10 or later.
Yeah, well, it depends on the model number. So you know, there's different points at which Android did some changes to prevent root access in the early days of Android. But it seems to be with carriers, like if you start getting into Android 9 or above, then there's a tighter integration with the operating system and the carrier to prevent you from doing anything. And again,
which is again why we're kind of sticking with the G3.
The G3 seems to be new enough that it's got usable hardware, but old enough that the manufacturer, LG, just doesn't care if somebody wants to put an older ROM. With the G3, we can rev back to Android version 4, you know, and then we carry on. Our procedure talks about Android version 4, version 5, I think it is, we put back. Anyway, dating it back. And the phone is not preventing you from doing these sorts of things because it's old enough. But I tell you, it's really bizarre to me as to why the phone manufacturers care so much about people not being able to rev their operating system back. And I don't think it's got to do with, if somebody has some comments out there or something, you know, please leave a comment. I don't think it's about security. Because the apps
having
themselves,
access to their old hardware is the only thing I can think of that they would care about. But again, it's old hardware. They have newer hardware out there now.
Right. I guess there's two possibilities in my mind. Is that they want to promote people buying new hardware all the time, right? Because consumer. So it's this life cycle sort of thing. I hope it's just that. But it's just very unsettling to think, you know, we can maybe do another video of the other possibilities. It's too bad because
it's not very green of them.
No, we were talking about this. There's all this useful hardware that's still out there that's, okay, so if it's lucky, it gets ground and properly recycled, but what percentage of phones actually do that?
Yeah, and even if they are, it's like that's kind of a waste because some of it, someone might have been willing to use that for a few more years.
Right. And as we said, the G3, for example, that phone is going to be a very useful, and the A5
would have been.
Yeah, for many years, and so. And
half the time, it's the battery that goes anyway in our phones, and it's like it's such a pain in the butt to replace a battery that's just easier to get a new phone.
So there's the other thing. So the Pixel XL that I'm using right now, battery isn't great, and the logistics of going inside that phone, again, compared to the modern last few years, is easier, but still, when you have to start getting into heat gun and remove it, it's clearly these phones are not meant for, you know, servicing. And so that gets a strong point of the G3 again. It's like, this is like, sort of like the pinnacle of cell phone technology.
Refurbishedness.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So anyway.
Refurb.
So yeah, this was a lot of information, but wow, unexpected learning experience from both of us, spending, you know, a lot of time trying to dig into this. And as we've talked about, we're trying multiple carriers in both Canada and US. And this is not to, I mean, we're not even thinking about testing carriers in other countries.
International, like,
yeah, so
beyond North America.
Right, so we'll see.
Anyways, thanks for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any insight or comments you'd like to let us know about, please leave it below. And you can also follow us on Bitchute and LBRY. Some of our videos are solely getting posted there now. And yeah, stay safe out there.